For the past 10 months, that's since about March 2025, I have been forcing myself to get AI to do ever more of the software development tasks. So how did it work out? What worked and what didn't work? What are the lessons learned? Let's have a look. This is the story of No Pressure, the AI native, tiny little website system. The history of AI coding for me starts with Claude 3.7. I know that there is a long history and many generations of Claude and other AI tools, and a lot of them have been used for code generation. But what I personally found was that if I have to explain to the computer in English over a long explanation what I want to do, I might as well just write it in a formal language. And particularly with excellent tools like the JetBrains IDEs, this works really well. And if you are used to explaining yourself what you want from the computer in a language that is understood by the computer, all right, okay. And I'm guessing that's kind of the general question we need to be asking about whether to use AI or not to use AI. Does it actually make us more effective or not? And for me, the answer was for a long while, no. And I have tried a lot of different options that worked pretty well, but really for code completions. It wasn't like you gave it a task and then it could do it. It was more like, what comes next in that source code line? And that can help, but it's not a game changer. With Claude 3.7, I think we reached the milestone where some tasks could be effectively handed off to AI to do. And there were tools by then, like Cursor and Windsurf, that did a pretty good job in putting around the AI capabilities a wrapper, like a packaging, that allowed you to focus on doing things rather than enabling the LLM to actually interact with your source code. So that was a big step forward. And so that was the point where I thought that, okay, so the only way to get ahead with this is to really force myself to change the way I work, because otherwise I would just continue doing what I have always been doing. Now, a big disclaimer here that what I'm going to talk about now is my experience as I used to work and I am working now with AI agentic tools. It's not that it's a universal experience, but it might help explain, what you experience. And you can also let me know if you have a different experience and how you manage things. So please comment below. And by the way, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please like and subscribe and join me on the rest of the videos. Now, this was the time when Mr. Karpati coined the term vibe coding, and it stuck. But I think it's worth to think about a bit what was meant by it. And we need to realize that our vibes might be different than the vibes of the one of the top AI specialists. What I didn't hear Mr. Karpati saying is that he single shots a large system. And at that time, that became kind of the headline grabber, that someone one-shotted a flight simulator or something like that. Instead, what we heard was more, I can use AI to do something, even potentially in a language I'm not so proficient in, and then I need to review it in detail, understand what it did, and then I would make a commit. So it was not let the AI loose and then see what happens. My experience was that to get Claude 4.7 to deliver anything useful was to break down the requirements to such a granular level that it would not wander off course. So now we are on the knife's edge, because if writing the explanation takes longer than writing the code myself, then of course we are in this efficiency question that why would I explain the AI what to do if I can do it faster and better? It was roughly the same effort to explain to the AI or write it myself. And that is why it started to make sense to work with it, because as I worked with it, my neural network will get to know how that neural network works and be able to find out what are the optimal approaches to get the best results out of this new system. A couple of observations about Claude 3.7. And to be fair, I have to say that some of these tricks still continue with Claude. One is that it tends to find bits and pieces to just fix. I would look at the Git status and see that this file has changed. What has changed? And I see okay, one line was updated. Why? And it turns out that sometimes it would realize that there was something that it didn't recognize, and then it fixed, which then made the system not compile. So brilliant. It tended to meddle into affairs that it was not supposed to. Even if the instruction was clearly focus on this, do only this, sometimes it would still do it. The other issue was the tendency to improvise, starting out to build something, and then it didn't work out as expected the first time. Then Claude would put something else to cover that problem, and then a third thing, because now the two didn't work properly together, and then a fourth and a fifth, and then it became a really complicated thing for something that should have been pretty straightforward, but somewhere it lost its way, and then it didn't figure it out. It wasn't able to, but it just started to apply fixes on the fixes and the fixes. This required a balance between three things. So how deep do you go in the requirement specification? How complex is the problem? And which language you are using? And this is actually an important point that I would highlight, is that depending on which language you use, the LLM may perform better or worse. I will come back to that in a moment. Now, could I distill this into a recipe that if you have a problem this complex or this type, then do this for requirements? Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to. I'm not sure even that's easy to formulate given the complexity of the LLMs. It's something that you have to get an experience with and also monitor what the LLM does as it progresses to see, okay, so it's veering off course, let's stop this now, because then you're just wasting your tokens and time. One approach I tried was to create a construct where you can start with a high-level requirement and then work your way down. That means starting with the high-level requirement, maybe even a large module, and then you break it down into parts and then go deeper and deeper until you get to a level where you have pretty good confidence that the LLM will be able to handle that piece individually. The depth might be different in different parts of the tree of breaking down the requirements. I never really got very far with that. But Kiro, you might be familiar with it. It's the AWS IDE that was released in the autumn 2025, kind of tries to do that. So it wasn't really a way to express myself so that I could rely on Claude generating what I wanted at the quality level I expected. In the meantime, something else happened too. In addition to large IDEs like JetBrains or Visual Studio Code, we got the command line agentic tools, Claude Code, Gemini CLI, and OpenAI Codex. At the beginning, I wasn't entirely sure about them because I liked the ability to supervise what they were doing, and the IDEs are really good indicating what has changed, right? So you can immediately say that, oh, okay, so the agent is working there. let's check what it's doing there. And that was very helpful in the IDEs. But there are two things that make the command line options attractive. One is that the IDEs are slow. They add a layer of complexity, which is because they have an IDE and they do a lot of things, so fair enough. And then the other thing is that most of them have this token resale kind of logic, that you pay a monthly fee and then you can get some tokens for some LLMs. Once you exhaust it, it's gone. On the command line, when you're buying directly from the labs, so basically from OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, you get something that regenerates. So you pay a monthly fee and you are rate limited rather than token limited. And I know you can add it up and you get like a total token limit. But I have to say that I've been using the Max or Pro versions once they came out, and that was always enough, even if I was working on 2 or 3 projects in parallel, having different agents do different things on different projects, basically the whole working day. So that was a really good deal, and I couldn't do that through the IDE options. One learning for me here was that buying directly from the original LLM providers may get a better deal. Since then, I have a Max or Pro subscription for my primary model, and then I have standard subscription with my other models. Today, I use ChatGPT as the primary model, and I have a subscription for Claude as the secondary. And I did try to subscribe to Gemini, but I couldn't figure out how to do that properly and then use it with Gemini CLI. So I just didn't care. I don't use Gemini a lot because I couldn't get it to generate code as I wanted to. So I use it as one of the reviewers. The biggest change, though, since the introduction of Claude 3.7 came in the summer of 2025, which was the introduction of GPT-5. And again, disclaimer, I will be explaining what I have experienced and your mileage may vary. But my experience before that was with GPT-4 and with the 023 models wasn't very good. I couldn't get ChatGPT to deliver nice, clean code, not even close to what Claude would deliver. Usually it left hanging like the call site. So if you make a change and you have other parts of the code referring to that function or method, then obviously you have to go and change all of that. But it wouldn't do that. It would just leave it there and then the code wouldn't even compile. Claude usually made the effort to at least try to fix the call sites and usually try to run the test so that we could see that it compiles and it still works. So that's brilliant. But GPT-5 was a whole new ballgame for me. What it was able to do is what I still cannot really get out of Claude, not even the latest 4.5 opus, is that it's professional, it's much more concise, it doesn't hype, there is no bombastic language, no green ticks, sorry, that's one of that really goes on my nerves, but it does do the chores, it does go around and fix, and it actually has like real substantial issue identification and good understanding of a lot of the higher level requirements. In August, I switched to ChatGPT for my primary and then downgraded Claude to the secondary. And since then, I've been using this setup with very good effectiveness. So now I'm going to say yet another something really controversial thing, so flame on. What I perceive now as a user of Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini is that ChatGPT is pretty much the most settled and reliable in terms of code quality and delivery. Not perfect. I'm not saying by far that it delivers perfectly, but it delivers to a reliably good quality. Claude is a little bit more like a very enthusiastic adolescent. It just jumps on the problem and tries to solve it, and then something comes out. It would triumphantly put into an update.md that I have replaced this API key with that API key, and then commit it into the repository. And then Gemini, I just can't get my head around Gemini because I read so many really brilliant reviews about it. And then when I try it, I mean, Gemini is fast. I'm really, really fast. I like that. But I just can't make it do what I want. For example, if I tell Claude or Codex, do not make code changes. I just want the plan or the assessment or the issue identification. They actually do that. I get the issue identification or the document I wanted or whatever. Gemini can't help itself to not go in and also do the change. Last time, and it's 3.0, the latest Gemini, I go and tell it I want this code review. It goes on, it does the code review. As it does it, it asks me, am I allowed to write to this file? So I said yes once. Okay, it goes on, it refines the findings and wants to write again. So I say, okay, fine, okay. In this session, you can write to the files. And then it finishes and then says, oh, the user said I can write. So let me fix it as well. It's like, come on, I told you that it's just the issue description. Don't make any code changes. It just can't help itself. So I use Gemini, but mostly for code reviews and not allowing it to just write in the repo because it really does anywhere it likes to. Now, I would like to highlight here, and there should be some link up here in the video. I have made a specific video about the uncertainties because what you can see is that you are working with this tool, it's computer, and you might be used to something deterministic, but it's not deterministic. It's very uncertain, and it's worth to have a look at what the different uncertainties and risks are when you are using AI on a day-to-day basis. As I said, your mileage may vary, and you might have a really good experience with Claude, and you might have figured out how to talk to it in a way that it actually does what you want, and great, that's perfect. What I would say is that in any case, my suggestion is keep all of them available for yourself. And even if you rely on one as your primary, the other two can see your code differently because they have been trained differently and they have been optimized differently. So use them to review what the primary did. It's a great help, and usually if I get the code review from all three and synthesize one out of it, I get a really good and substantial list of items to consider. One of the points I note in that video is the immense importance of documentation. What you might see is that the LLMs search, grab, take the information wherever it is in your repo. They are really good at this, and fair enough. And if there is something that is contradictory, they can easily get confused and go down, for example, on an old route that have been closed off and moved on from, but there is some lingering relevant information in one of the documents or source code, and then they start going on that tangent instead of what you intended them to do. So the question was, how can I get documentation, requirements, change management, all in such a format or concept that will not confuse the LLM, but rather help it to deliver the change I would like to have? And important point about LLMs as well is that the more structured the workflow, the better. So if they have a checklist, a list of work items or task list, very good. But how can we have something that brings all of this together? I started to use what I call a feature document. This document becomes the interface between you and the LLM. It should have the action plan, the current technical content, and the future technical content. And it should have a clear designation of its status. I will make another video about this specifically because I think it's worth exploring how this works. Since I have started using feature documents, I have observed a very consistent delivery. It's very rare. If I read the feature document properly, then it's very rare that I get bad output. If I didn't pay attention, then funny things can creep in and, it's on me. If I do have a properly prepared feature document, then it becomes a much more straightforward and efficient process, both for my time and the LLM's time. And let's close with this because this is already a very long video. Prioritize documentation. If you look at an action plan that any of the LLMs bring up, generally what they say, do the update, do the tests, do the documentation. No. Make it put documentation first. Put it into your agents MD. Documentation comes first. When you make an action plan, prioritize documentation. Why? Because it rereads that. Every time it compacts its context window, it rereads the documentation. And if it rereads the old one, then you have just poisoned the next iteration with the old stuff. Make it change the documentation first. Nail it what you actually want, and then make it do the code change, and then make it do the tests, and make sure that all tests pass. Not just the new tests, all tests pass. My next step is to make the video on the feature document, so please subscribe so you get a notification when I post it. Until then, thank you and see you on the next video.